do the approval of the first one during the last meeting. So we'll go ahead and do those in order. And that is going to be first the November 24th, 2020 minutes. And so the first question would be, does anybody have any amendments or changes that they see would be required for that? Seeing none, I would move that we approve the minutes for November 24th, 2020 as written. Do I have a second?
Seconded.
All right, a second from Marty. And our roll call, again in order. Marty?
I'm in favor.
I am in favor. Let's see, Dan?
I'm in favor.
Craig? Raising his hand in favor. All right, so unanimously that is passed. And the next set of minutes is from our last meeting, which was December 22nd, 2020. And I actually have two amendments to make to this. One is page 3, line 35. And neither of these are substantive changes, but this one sort of is, but not really. And the line currently reads, possibly because of the way the project would have to be wired. And I would suggest that that should be possible to directly assist abutters because of the way the project would have to be wired. And the second would be on page 4, line 15. And that is the attorney's name, which should read Douglas Patch. Are there any other suggestions for amendments or any dissent to those amendments or changes? All right, seeing several heads shaking no, I would move that we approve the minutes from December 22nd, 2020 as amended. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Dan Nudd. And roll call. Marty?
I'm in favor.
Myself in favor. Dan?
In favor.
Craig?
Yes.
All right, and that is unanimously passed, and that takes care of our minutes. So next up, we are now going into the general business section and the kind of meat of what we're doing. And so that was to be the MOU report from boards and committees. I guess I will do the quick start and Craig can fill in if there's anything else he wants to add for the planning board. And that is that the planning board met and briefly discussed this as part of the meeting, does want to be more heavily involved once we have full details to do things like a site plan review style of work from the planning board, but we do not have updated, more detailed maps yet and similar engineering reports from the solar company yet for that. Craig, was there anything else that you felt we should add in from the planning board? You're muted.
No, that pretty much covers it.
Okay. And so the next would be, let's see, just again, going in the same order as of people I have here. Marty, I don't think you had ZBA, but I know you were contacting some people and we did discuss stuff at the Energy Committee.
The ZBA really had nothing to say. I never got any response from the ZBA. But obviously the Energy Committee, and you know about the Energy Committee. We were sort of semi-active. I think that, what would you say, Dave?
I would say that the Energy Committee is interested in making sure that the project moves forward, but doesn't really have specific input on the MOU because that's not their particular foray in
Right.
place, but does look forward to being able to do the community or aggregate power discussions in the future.
Right.
Let's see. So the next person that I have here, well, actually, the only other board that I have representative of here right now would be Chris for the Conservation Commission. Chris, what happened at the Conservation Commission for the MOU, and what did they say and want to be involved with, or how did they see their process working?
So we're still waiting for a better map from Olivewood. And this is a problem, you know, that I talked to Dominic, and he knows that we need a better map. We can't really recommend anything to your committee until we see potential areas of impact to wetlands and that kind of thing. So, you know, as far as the Conservation Commission goes, it's sort of on hold. And Dominic thought that by February, maybe a week or two into February, that he would have a better map for us. So depending upon, you know, when you want to have your next meeting, and if the Conservation Commission has had time to look at the map, then perhaps we can have some information for you. But I have a couple of things that are kind of good here. Let's see, there was a person that attended the Conservation Commission meeting at our last meeting, and he is a person from town who has a large and valuable tract of land that he thinks might be a good piece of land to perhaps interest Olivewood in mitigating some of the impact of what they're going to do over on Deer Meadow. The tract of land, I can't remember how many acres it is, but it's substantial, and I've walked it, and it's very beautiful. The value of the land, the greatest value, is that it has a lot of water frontage on the Blackwater. And so since you know, we know that Deer Meadow itself, we don't, you know, this won't directly help that, but to put into conservation or under some kind of easement, that piece of land would be really key. So there's that, and so that's an exciting thing, possibly. I talked to Dom about that, and he was very interested in finding out more about it. They, you know, they have agreed, I'm sure you've told your gang here that they have agreed to pay for our legal expenses, depending upon what we think or Douglas thinks that they're going to be, as well as they're willing to purchase mitigating land. So, and they're also willing to pay for, you know, if we should hire, for example, a wetland scientist to do a review of GZA's work, and you know, he would get out in the field, whereas I'm not sure GZA would get in the field. They'd probably use LiDAR and other things. He would also pay for that. So he was I was very encouraged by how forthcoming he was on that. Here comes my dog. So, two dogs.
So I will point out that I believe we've mentioned in the past that there was interest, and it was generally normal for a company such as Olivewood to cover these sorts of things. And we've basically had the that makes sense agreement. But as to my knowledge, we do not yet have anything signed in writing for covering any of those. And so we are still waiting on that before we can, for example, engage the specific lawyer for this project, or to go more in depth with the other kinds of studies. Another study that I have made sure will be requested for them to cover whenever we get the signed documents for that will be a economic and tax impact study. so that we will be able to accurately portray how the pilot is going or will go, and whether what those numbers are actually like for the town.
Mhm.
And so those are things that are on the list. They're not part of the MOU updates at this point in time, but
Could you elaborate a little more on what that would involve? I mean, why,
which
what
part?
would that involve and why?
Which part?
Well, economic impact. I mean, is that reduced taxes? Is that incentive to other activities in town? What would that involve?
So generally, you would see from a company like this what they would call an economic impact report. And that would normally be the look how much money we're giving to the town in a pilot, look how much money we're doing and how many jobs we're creating by doing the construction, et cetera. And all of that is used to as, hey, these are great things, and shown to the SEC to help it make it more palatable and more desirable to approve it. What we as a town would look at doing for that is not just the impact of, okay, you're giving us pilot stuff or you're creating jobs. It would be what are the valuations we should expect and the extra amounts of taxes that we as the town will have to be paying, and how does that offset versus the pilot payments and so on and so forth. So it's basically a more complete picture of how this will affect our finances as a town and therefore your tax rates at the end of the day. And again, we're kind of waiting to see where we'll be with all of that, but I want to have all of that accurate information to present to our town and show our town. Currently, we don't have that. To all of the research that I've been able to do and the people I've reached out to, we don't have that from the previous pilot, though that does make some sense since it was a much smaller project, and B, the expensive parts that weren't just a bunch of panels were not expected to be on either Webster or private land, whereas now they are. So things have changed, and so it makes sense to try and get a study like this done so we can look at things appropriately. And I guess I didn't want to cut off Chris, but since we were a little bit further from the MOU stuff, I felt like it was worth mentioning the details there. Chris, did you have anything further?
No, really. We're sort of on hold. And I reminded Dom that, the longer it takes for them to do what they're doing on their end, the longer it's going to take for us, for your committee, and the rest of us. We're all just kind of in limbo here. So I know he was anxious for us to really get going on the MOU and all of that, and then it's just not that easy to do when you don't have the material you need. So
yeah, I will point out that they did mention that mid-February was their hope, but within the next couple of months, when we had the public hearing meeting, was what they were expecting for providing that more detailed plan. And so it's not like anything's delayed. It's not like they're hiding anything.
Right.
They have engaged us as early as possible, basically. And so we get to see all of the stuff that not necessarily is finished. And so that's why we don't see a finished, polished plan sitting in front of us at this time. The second thing that would kind of go along with that is, I know I mentioned at a previous meeting that I was planning on putting together kind of an MOU draft, but I'd wanted to hear from the Conservation Commission what parts of it they were interested in first. And also we had heard, or I should say, we were also told by Olivewood that they wanted to provide us a draft. And so before creating
right.
something brand new, I wanted to see what they were putting forth as well, and to kind of pull it all together and use bits of all of it. We have not seen that yet either, which makes some sense to me because they're still doing their planning of where everything will be, where borders will be, and of course that will affect things like tree cover or fencing, or where runoff, etc. will be.
Mhm.
So just like we are on hold with the planning board for the site review part, and the conservation commission with the wetlands and nature review portions, they're kind of on hold and getting us that due to the same thing, waiting on the engineering to get more completed. So unfortunately, that's where we kind of are with the MOU, which is without too much more to do at this point. We can certainly discuss areas. We had some areas that we were interested in discussing further from the last meeting. But does anyone else have a specific topic for the MOU, either as an update or as a section they want to discuss at this point? All right. So one of the things that was brought up that needed further discussion from last time, that I feel we can probably try to address here, or at least come up with some specific questions that we may want to ask, was the concept of the herbicides. And that was brought up from the overview of the sample MOU, and Craig made some comments on it. And most people seem to agree that we just wanted to kind of ban or not allow it at all, instead of the way it was written, which was except as a last resort. And then we also had some discussion about, well, there could be extreme events in the future that we don't foresee. So maybe it makes sense to leave it listed as a last resort, but because we don't want to have it be allowed as just them saying it's a last resort, also make it required that it be both a last resort and approved by the select board. And so there were comments around that. I believe, Craig, you were still in opposition of that, but I will let you speak to that because I don't want to speak for you. You are muted still.
That sounds like a reasonable compromise to me.
All right. And so I bring that up because we do have Chris here, who is Conservation Commission, as well as Select Board. So Chris, I see you have some comments.
Well, I have been thinking about the herbicide issue, and wondering why, instead of needing to do that at all, why grasses can't be put in that area between those between the panels, grasses that don't grow higher than, say, 6 or 8 inches. And there are such grasses, and the soil over in that area, I'm thinking of the Johnny Little's property, probably Barbara Corliss's property, is a kind of a tilth, gravelly mix, and there are a number of drought tolerant grasses that are short that could be put in plugs. And initially the cost would be a little bit higher for Olive Wood to do that, but in the end they wouldn't have to maintain or cut around the panels at all. So I wonder, this is only my first time sitting in on your committee, but I wanted to ask whether you all have considered options like that.
So I'll actually address a little bit of this before we go back into opening up the discussion. One, I did just say herbicides here, but it was basically herbicides, insecticides, and other sorts of chemicals. And one of the examples was, for example, out in California, Oregon, no one saw the quote killer bees coming. And so if you needed to address something like that, should something like this be an option if approved? Or should it just still be off the table and too bad, deal with it sort of thing? For herbicides, I don't really see a particular time that would ever be a drastic, we have to do this. But of course, maybe there's some sort of super invasive, poisonous species that's killing off everything else, and there's an herbicide for it. I don't know, but I don't want to prevent a future good option to allow the nature to stay sustained.
Well,
As far as the general concept, we do know that Olivewood is planning to come up with a seed mix that should not need manual maintenance or other care and should be able to stay under the growth of the panels and provide for the nature that's going to be going in and through the land. We don't have what that mix is, but that is definitely a part of how we would look at this, either from an MOU or from an environmental studies impact. So yes, we are definitely expecting something of that nature, whether it's grasses or not. So herbicides should not be expected in any way, shape, or form.
Well, can I make a comment here?
Please.
And that's that it's planting these grasses is a great idea. As long as you have any kind of topsoil, if you're not down to gravel, you're going to get not necessarily invasive species, but you're going to get everything. You're going to get red maple, you're going to get aspen, you're going to get, stuff just comes in. Through, you can plant the grasses in plugs, and between the plugs, you're going to get other stuff coming in there. So
the wonderful birds will plant everything.
Yeah. So, I mean, planting the grasses is nice words. Let's put it that way. I'm not sure how workable it is.
Just look at what's happening with our panels, right? The 44 panels. We have bushes that come up. We have to trim them every year. And that was after we put down, I'm trying to remember, I think D had something that we were putting down, basically black plastic and gravel over it. And it doesn't make any difference. It's still coming up.
It's gravel and like a black fabric, weed stop material. All of that's down there, and it grows on top where the dirt and dust blew in between the gravel, and then it just grows on top of it. So
well, my preferred solution would be to put the panels far enough apart so you can mow down through there, get a small tractor and mow down, just like they do with apple orchards and things. It's either that or herbicides, I think you're looking at.
And I would suggest that, again, we'll need to see their engineering, but in general, your panels would be far enough apart in order to do that, to be able to put, because these are tall, large panels, not the sorts of panels that we see on, for example, our municipal array at the school. And so these should have the supports far enough apart to be able to do that.
Right. And that should be part of the design criteria, The other thing that they're going to bring up, they're going to say, oh, you mow down there, you're going to be kicking up stones. The stones are going to hit the panels. They're going to say that, and they're probably right about that too.
Well, we would be expecting them to maintain it because it is their business and their equipment. So there's no like us worrying about that. They can figure out how they want to manage it. But if we tell them, yeah, herbicides are not going to be an option, so make sure you maintain it. That's kind of the way that I think that makes sense. But again, I don't want to enforce like, I don't have a good example for a plant, but I don't want to enforce that a good option to manage something can't be done in the future with agreement by the town or the board if needed. Dan, looks like you have a comment.
Well, I was the one that mentioned with the approval of the select board, I don't want to see them use herbicides at all. There's no reason to. They can do grasses. I just don't want to tie their hands for the reason I was thinking more pesticides. If for some reason we had an invasive species that came in that was determined there was no other resort, then the select board has to approve that resort, and the select board could still say, no, there's another way. I just didn't want to tie their hands in the future and 20 years down the road, something that we can't foresee right now happen. And now they can't use that recourse because we made it so they can't. That was my only thought. I don't want them to use pesticides or herbicides if they don't have to. I just don't want to tie their hands in any way. That was my only point.
Yep. And I would personally agree with that. So it sounds like we have a semi-reasonable compromise here in that we allow the select board to override that portion in the future if need be. I will leave that as a tentative decision, and we'll of course relook at all of these things when we have a written draft of an MOU and hopefully the entire set of the subcommittee here before we can recommend that to the select board. But that is the way that I will leave that tentatively decided.
Could we have the conservation weigh in on that as well, Dave, to see how they feel on that?
That's
In the
kind of what I
future?
just asked, but yes.
Okay. Sorry, repeating what you're saying.
So let's see here. Other things that we were basically waiting to find out information on. We don't have more maps and stuff or specifics of their equipment yet to ask about things like the substations, the generators, and the sound expected out of them. But we will be looking at what the MOU portion for like when and how often those run, even though probably nobody will really hear them from where that would be up at the substation. We want to control that and make it manageable, even if it is able to be heard. And we would certainly want them to do things like if they're running more noisy equipment at the substation, to put up sound insulating type walls or I should say fences right around that equipment as part of their rather than just a chain link fence for security. They can put up something that can block sound as well. And so those sorts of things become options and what we should consider further in that MOU once we have more information. Since we have Dana, I know we had also been requesting more information from Fitzwilliam as far as things like their environmental studies and what their pilot looked like and so on. Did we get any response from them?
They're going to work on that for me. Basically, what I was asking them is to get an idea of what the expense would be for legal work and environmental work. So I hope I have it soon, but I don't as of today.
All right. And so that pretty much sums up that section of this. Is there any further MOU discussion or sections that people want to bring up at this time? Okay, seeing none. Just as we were getting into that, I believe Dan was trying to make a comment, and then we kind of just kept going instead of taking that comment. And that was, I believe, just as Chris was getting going. And that was Dan White, I think. Did you have anything further that you wanted to ask or comment on?
Just two quick things, if I may.
Please.
One, very quick administrative thing. I attended the Conservation Commission meeting, and Chris actually asked me to call her or talk with her the next day. Chris, you never reached back out to me after we had talked about that email. I didn't know where that stood.
You're muted, Chris.
Yeah, sorry. Dan, I'm so sorry. I thought you were going to call me.
Well, Chris, I told you on that call, when it's a public meeting, I'm sure you can look at the minutes where it said I would email you my phone number, which I did.
Oh,
And I emailed you a
Here we
second
go
time,
again.
and I've never heard from you. So
yeah, Dan,
just
I'm sorry, I didn't get anything. And that's not uncommon for my email. So I deeply apologize. I would have responded right away.
So I'll just chime in here. Yeah, Chris does commonly end up with saying that she can't get something out of email or didn't receive it. But anything for example, if it's land, etc., sending that through Dana is a good idea, because then he can make sure that Chris has gotten it at a future meeting or
Yeah,
when
that's
she
true.
stops into the office, etc. So going through Dana is probably the easiest or best method for that.
okay, thank you. I will do that. The only other thing I wanted to just mention, and this requires no action on the committee at this point. However, I do want to point out that there's a tremendous amount of information and comments being made about this project. And from the perspective of being a homeowner and a abutter, I've not had one single conversation or been approached by any member from the town of Webster at all, not one time. And based on comments that we're making and assumptions we're making as far as noise, viewing of the panels, I think are interesting pieces of conversation to have. But is it in fact do I expect to hear, or should I just attend these meetings and have to be proactive instead of being involved with the process? Because we talk about mitigating lands to a very pretty area on the river, but there's no conversation about the land that may be affected negatively, just how we're going to mitigate it on the other end. So and they used the salamander example the other night in the Conservation Commission. Well, I really wish that some of these areas and these animals knew that there were property lines, but they don't always realize that. And sometimes it goes across that property line onto my land. And just to be part of the discussion or the solution there, or at least to hear how that's going to be mitigated for the homeowner, or if it's not, I just need to know that as well, so I can determine what I'm doing. So
So thank you very much for that comment. And I'll tell you kind of my plan for how I wanted to handle that. And that was basically once we've basically continually been waiting for further information and a more detailed plan. And once we have the more detailed plan, to say, for example, we're expecting panels to be, 200 feet from the property edge here, 50 feet from the property edge here, and 500 feet from the property edge here. At that point, then we can actually look at, is this something that someone would actually see? Will anybody care? But more importantly, in order for a homeowner or an abutter, et cetera, to be able to understand whether this will really impact them or whether they'll see it or not, we need that plan. So once we have that plan, my intent was to then notify the abutters. much like would be typically done through a site plan review, public hearing sort of thing for the planning board.
You know, if I can add something to that, that typically Olivewood would be getting around to talking to every single abutter on this project.
And they did
as
mention that they wanted to. So
Yeah.
I don't know that where they are in that or when, but they did
I
mention
don't-
that they wanted to.
right. And so,
I not to get into it too much, but I had a visitor on my land without announcement last year, and that's how I learned about the project. Was me capturing this person out on my property, and I asked him what he was doing there, and he said, I have written permission to be here. Ironically, he was on my land, and I had not given them written permission, and that's the first I heard about Olivewood Energy. When I went to the town and inquired, the town said, well, we're keeping this quiet. We're allowing them to do their initial assessment. We don't really make it public because we don't want to create problems. And we allow the companies to kind of get into the meat and potatoes of what they want to do. I accepted that for face value and then never received anything other than I did receive a call from Dom right after I caught this individual on my land. And it was not a good conversation initially. I have talked with Dom as recently as a week ago. That was the first time we had a conversation. So that's the first time I've been approached. And yet, to the same issues that you bring up tonight, there's still a lot of questions on their part as well. So I'm trying to be patient and let things come to fruition. However, I also just want to make sure that if the abutters aren't really cared for in this process, other than just attending a public hearing and being able to say what I want to say, but not really being considered, that's important to know. I mean, I live here, you live here, we all live here, we're neighbors. I look at Marty's background and that pretty property, and I see where I've lost 90 acres abutting me already of trees that have been approved to be agriculture, and now all of a sudden it's going to be solar panels. So understand I'm cautious simply because I've been burned twice now since 2018, and I really don't want to make it a third time. And it sounds like it's heading down that path. So if I can have, yes, sir.
Can I ask you where you live, Dan?
I'm at 8 Deer Meadow Road. I am the one that abuts the 90 acres on, so I'm where the substation will be. And ironically, when Dave mentioned that, go ahead.
Yeah, there's two homes right along after the town boundary. There's the road into their property, and then there's two homes along there. Are you one of the homes along there, or where are you?
I'm the one who owns the road.
Oh, okay.
I own that land, so I'm right on the town line.
Oh, okay.
So
I got it. Thank you.
Right before those two homes, or right after those two homes on the left, my road, the one road goes out to the property, and one goes up to my driveway.
Oh, got it. Okay, thank you.
So I look out on my deck. I look at that field. Now I can't see it like it's a big open field, but I see it. So now I imagine, and Dave, you mentioned taller panels. I can see them. I've already talked to Dom about this. I can go out in the middle of that field right now and shine a light back, and my wife sees it here in the middle of the night. And so during the summer months, it may not be as prominent. However, in the winter months, once the leaves fall, I'm going to see these. So that's what I talked to Dom about. We're going to have a landscape architect come out and take a look at it. But again, these are things that as I educate myself, and if I share these with you, I don't want to waste your time. If you really aren't interested and you're just kind of listening because you feel obligated to listen to me, then I don't want to waste your time. If you're really going to consider these things, then I'm happy to be here and happy to share information as I determine it. And I just want to make sure that as this committee considers all of these factors and all of the kind of the comments in some cases are kind of laissez-faire about what the impact might be on Deer Meadow, but we'll make it up somewhere else. Hey, I live here. What's this going to do to my property values? What's this going to do to my house? What's going to do to our way of living? What's it do to the wildlife? what's it do to the snowmobile trail that's on my land? All of those things. And I know those things are being considered and hopefully will be worked out. But hence the reason I wanted to be here and have this conversation. I don't want to drag your meeting down into a big mire, but I do appreciate you giving me the time to talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are the kinds of things that we are absolutely need to be aware of and will need to be looking at. It is fair to say that we can't, that we would be unlikely to hold an entire process up for a specific demand from a specific individual, unless that was deemed to be actually really a non-starter or a blocker. But to take into consideration things like, well, you've got these visibility things, they should really be doing some sort of landscaping or way to make it so that you have a better view to compensate for that. Those are absolutely appropriate and things that, if they were not already on the table, should definitely have been considered. Now, I would be surprised, based on the conversations that we have had so far from Olivewood, if they do not have something of that nature set for a particular stage in their development. Once they have, like, this is where we want our panels and how much and that sort of thing. But I can certainly be surprised by them not having it. So it's very good for us to have that on a list to make sure that they are considering those things. And moving forward on that aspect, it is fairly common, and again, we've just started as a town asking for, in this case, Olivewood to compensate for various studies and or legal. It's actually fairly common for a visibility and or a sound study, et cetera, depending on the kinds of infrastructure that's going into place or that will be changing things. So that's definitely not out of the realm of normal. And so I would definitely expect that discussions like that will start happening once we go into what for us would normally be a site plan review stage, once we have a more detailed and accurate set of maps and engineering. But we can't, unfortunately, we really can't discuss details of that until we know that. Chris, do you have any further comments on that? You're muted.
Sorry. I was just looking back through all of my emails and to my other file where spam sometimes goes, and there's nothing there from you. So maybe you misspelled my last name, something like that.
No, ma'am. I went on the town of Webster's website and clicked on your name and your link, and it sends a
Okay. Okay. I don't know why I didn't get it, Dan, but I truly feel sorry that I didn't get back to you. That's why I didn't hear from you. So, and that's why you didn't hear from me, because I did not hear from you. So if you would be so, can you share your telephone number with me now? Do you feel comfortable doing that?
This is live through YouTube. I would not.
Yeah, I would rather not. I will.
Okay.
I will send a note. I'm going to send a note to Dana right now, though.
Okay, good.
That will be perfect. Thank you.
And then, I have the flexibility in my life to come over to your place and see what it is you're telling us about. I'd be glad to do that. And I also do remember, and Dave, I think I remember pretty clearly that they have said that they will work with private landowners to make sure that vegetation is put in so that your view is protected. There was somebody else that had a similar kind of concern, I think, down on Deer Meadow.
They did state that they were interested in addressing the visibilities of it during the public hearing. I believe that was, I don't remember the person, but the question was looking through trees and possibility of planting additional trees that would be evergreen trees so that they wouldn't have the look through
Right,
during the
right,
winter.
exactly. I
But
think,
things of that nature, they did indicate they were interested in.
right. So,
I would also point out that at least while I've been here, we as a town have not authorized anybody to just go start walking on private landowners' land.
mhm,
I would absolutely be against that. I'm fine if they want to come notify you that they would like to look and then be allowed permission. But I don't know how or when that happened because I wasn't on the board, but I would definitely have been against that.
I hope I didn't make it sound like I felt that any of you endorsed this individual doing that. I literally caught him parked at the end of my driveway. There was a car there. I happened to be down cutting wood, and so I rode out and found this individual, and that's how it happened. So, not anything that I would have put on the town of Webster at that point. My only issue with the town of Webster was the lack of information that I've received when I inquired about it. And Dana, I have sent an email through that, through the portal for Webster just now.
I will watch for it, Dan.
Thank you.
All right. So I think that pretty much concludes what we can do for our MOU discussion at this point, as everybody and the boards are continually waiting for more detailed information. So I would like to try and set up that next meeting. Let me double check here. Okay, that is not that. And so let's see. Chris, when are you expecting the February Conservation Commission meeting?
so it's going to be the second Wednesday in February, February 10th.
Okay.
So I don't know whether
And
that, I don't know how that works with Dom's schedule for,
Yep. And so the planning board would typically be the Thursday, the 18th. So trying to go after all of those, I would suggest that we do the same and make sure that we give as much time as possible to have something to really look at and dive into. I would suggest that our next meeting should probably be February 23rd, which is the last Tuesday of the month. And again, the same time. How does that work for everybody else on the committee's time schedules? And I have a thumbs up from Dan. How about you, Craig? Looks good. Marty?
Yeah, it's okay with me.
All right. I don't believe there's anything else scheduled over the top of that. Chris, just to make sure, is there some sort of salt shed meeting or anything? I believe
No,
those sometimes happen Tuesdays.
no. Mm-mm.
Okay. Dana or Russ, do you have anything else that might be conflict with that?
Not that I know of. Yeah,
All right.
looks to be a good date.
So I would suggest then that we will schedule for February 23rd at 7 o'clock for our next one. And hopefully we will have additional details. If we have not had details yet from Olivewood for at least one of the boards to, or at least for us to see, even if the boards didn't get a chance, I would actually look forward to then canceling that meeting or postponing it a month. If I were to do that, I would try to follow the same sort of timing, which would be after the other boards and commissions meeting. That looks like it would probably be March 23rd at that point, also a Tuesday. I'm not going to try and schedule that right now because I'm going to hope that we actually have what we're supposed to have, which is documentation for our next meeting. But that would be my attempt if we are unable to get that in time. So then we have public comment and any further business. I know we've heard some comment already. I also see that we have a Jeff in attendance. Jeff, did you have any comments that you wanted to share?
No comments. Thank you very much.
All right. Craig, you're muted. Craig, you're muted. You're muted, Craig.
Sorry.
There you are.
Oh, there I am. Sorry. It just came to my attention that the New Hampshire Land Trust Coalition, which is a consortium of New Hampshire land trusts, is having a morning meeting, 12 to noon on February 18th, citing solar and conservation easements, opportunities and challenges. So land trusts have a lot of conservation easements, and they're interested in citing solar projects on those. So this is a workshop. It's $20 to attend. If you're interested, I would go to the New Hampshire Land Trust Coalition website. I sent a link to David. Maybe I should send it to Dana.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just see that now. Sorry, I haven't been looking during the meeting at my email, but
I
yes.
just wanted to make people aware if they're interested in this stuff.
Yeah, I'm going to forward that to Dana so he can distribute that to everybody who becomes interested, whether or not they're on the, I'll include Russ as well. And that way, anyone who is interested can contact Dana and get that information.
Okay.
Yeah, Dana, would you, once you get that from David, could you send that over to Dan Moran from Conservation?
I certainly can.
Okay, great,
Yeah.
thank you. And that's the 18th of February?
Yes, it is. 9 a.m. to 12 noon.
Okay, good.
And are you planning on attending that, Craig?
Yes, I am.
Okay. I see that's right before the, or I should say that's the morning before the planning board meeting. So I will probably try to attend that. But if I cannot, I look forward to hearing all about it from you.
Yeah, it may or may not be relevant to us, but there might be some bits of facts that are kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Does any other public have or members have comment? All right. So on that note, then I will make one last comment in that there has actually been interest from another solar company expressed doing something similar again in a different portion of Webster.
Oh dear.
We are not involved in that at this point in time and are unlikely to be the ones involved in that. However, if that does become anything, they will likely be looking at our work as a model. So just a reminder of emphasis that what we do is important, and while it doesn't bind anything else, certainly can set precedent for here in Webster.
I would like to make a recommendation that all of would go with them, go somewhere else other than my land. I'm just saying.
From what I have heard, it is a much smaller attempt than this, kind of like what Olivewood had originally intended. But
I'm okay with smaller, Dave. I have no issue with that.
But I also have a feeling that based on the rumors that I have heard about it, that it probably won't happen at all. but there has been interest expressed elsewhere, and until there is actually information to share, I won't bother letting us think about it any further. But I wanted to make note that, that Olivewood's not the only one looking at trying to do this. The various political powers all over the place have basically made this super favorable, and our tax rate is fairly low compared to many. So we are an ideal place for it, and we actually have I should say, undeveloped land that makes it possible as well, whereas many places no longer have undeveloped land. So
I worry as a conservationist about land trusts and solar companies looking at open land and assuming that the highest and best use is a solar farm. I worry desperately about that because, you know, habitat is vanishing in a million different ways. And this is certainly not conducive to sound wildlife habitat management. I am a pro solar energy person, and I don't want to be in a not in my backyard kind of thing. But, you know, I think I understand, Dan, how you feel. And so Dave, I'd be very interested to know even what the rumors are on this at some point.
I believe they contacted Russ. Russ, did you want to say like a quick where they were thinking?
I
If you
think they
have
were thinking about the hunting preserve in Phillipsbury Lake,
Oh,
which I don't think would happen
no,
because it's a
Right.
hunting preserve.
Exactly.
right.
So my point is not that this is going to happen, but that people are looking. So expect that our work is actually interesting to people, even if they're not showing up to meetings.
Mhm.
Along the lines of what you mentioned there for land trusts and the like, and also the previous comment that we are an agricultural zoned area. There has been a lot of work recently in some neighboring areas of being able to do solar and farming at the same time on the same piece of land. So that's something that we might possibly look at mentioning to Olivewood as well, if we want to suggest something of like, hey, let's have
You
them
know,
grow some crops.
we could grow crops of like pumpkins and other squashes. What a brilliant idea. Just grow thousands and thousands of pumpkins and squashes in the summertime. You know, they stay low to the ground.
And they cover everything.
They do. They do.
But in any case, so those sorts of things have been happening, and several of the companies that design and create these solar panel mounting brackets have actually been coming up with the way to do the appropriate poles and mounts to do this and allow for farming equipment to go underneath it and work on it. Of course, the downside to that is all of this gets raised further up into the air, so it's more likely to be visible from all kinds of places. Not necessarily something to say, hey, go do this, but it is something where if, for example, you know, pumpkins, whatever, granted, I don't think we need 1 million pumpkins grown each year, but you know, it's that kind of thing where it might be worth a discussion in the future once we see what they have in mind, or maybe we only suggest that they do that in a part that is further away from folks. So things to consider in the future.
Right.
That wraps it up for me. Any other further business or public comments? All right, seeing none, I would move to end this meeting.
And I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
And the hands are raised. Have a wonderful night, everybody. Thank you. And I look forward to
Thanks.
seeing you next month.
Night.
Night.